Hello, everyone. My name is Patti Hoelzle. I was honored to ask to present this information about parenting in the post-pandemic world to your PTC a few nights ago. And I thought since some of you couldn't make it, it's a busy time of year in families and in sports and in our school year. So I thought I would record the slides for you and get them out just in case you were there and want to re-watch the information, let it soak in a bit, or if you didn't have a chance to make it. So I titled this presentation, Parenting in the Post-Pandemic World. Coming out of COVID, there are a number of silver linings, things we want to remember, and consequences that are affecting both us and our children. And we're going to be talking through a few of those today. So here is my family. Again, my name is Patti Hoelzle. I am a professional school counselor. I've worked in a few different school districts. But what I mostly am passionate about is walking alongside parents and teachers as they are raising our children as part of our village today. And I'll talk through some of the pieces of my family that led to this as my passion project. Because what I have really dove into and done a lot of research about is kids with trauma. So, kiddos that have experienced traumatic events learn differently and need some different things in a parenting or a teaching relationship in order to thrive. And so, while typically I present to parents and teachers about that, because we have all now lived through a traumatic experience, which was the COVID shutdown, I have some things to share with a little bit of a larger audience. So I share this picture. This is a picture of my family during our COVID Christmas, matching pajamas, the whole thing. So there's me, my husband, and my two kiddos. They are now 20 years old and 15 years old, but here they are 17 and 12, turning 13. And before you say it, I get this all the time. Patti, you are not old enough to have four cats. And I agree with you. So we got some COVID kitties during that time and added to our family. So there is what I call Team Hoelzle Brown, my little crew. So let's take you back to COVID. Here are some things that our society and our world did to help us stay safe and also survive some different pieces of school and work and home life. So we stayed home for our safety. We used technology at a much higher rate in order to have accessibility to the outside world. And then our school and work design definitely changed during this time. So go back there a bit, let it soak in. And I am sorry for the trigger word I am about to say, but the silver lining. So before we start about some of the consequences, I would love for you to think back to the positive aspects of the COVID shutdown. What can you remember from your experience that was positive? Many times when I ask this question, some of the answers are family time together, trying new things together, like maybe cooking, or as I'm going to talk about, gardening was a big one. And then definitely that slower pace. These are some things that even to this day, as I'm rushing from thing to thing, I'm like, Patti, you asked for this. Remember that, because sometimes it can help to put things into perspective. However, there were some consequences of this shutdown and some of these strategies as well. So, our children and potentially us could be feeling isolation and anxiety, some addiction, especially to the technology that was provided, social media, perhaps for our older children and teens, and then this concept of falling behind in academics, which I will definitely talk about today. I do want to say before I get started today that as I am walking alongside you as parents and teachers, my frame of reference is something that I call rooted well. So there is some attachment theory that guides my work and a love of nature that guides my work. And I would just like to share this quote with you that a small tree with strong roots will outlive a big tree with weak ones. So, as we're thinking about our children growing up, we think about their milestones and their success, their physical, emotional, and spiritual growth. but we also want them to withstand storms. And inevitably, there will be transitions and things in life that will be hard. And those strong, strong roots underneath the surface is what is going to make them resilient and strong to withstand those storms. So, like I said at the beginning, I am definitely not a parenting expert, but what I like to call myself is a parenting sampler platter or a teaching sampler platter. I have digested a ton of information to how to build resilient children, and I pick the pieces that might stick for you and share those back to you. So that's where we're going to go with the rest of our presentation today. So, one of the things you may have experimented with during COVID, as did I, was gardening. And so we are going to frame our conversation today about our children and gardening and what a tree or a plant needs to really survive and thrive and grow into what we want it to is some really simple things that if we have in the front of our brain to provide consistently will help us reach where we want to go. So those things that I'm going to be covering as a metaphor is optimal soil, water, weeding, fertilizer, and then the last, probably the hardest step is going to be letting go. So the first place we're going to start is in our home. And the soil that I speak of is really our home and the things we're providing to our children every single day, either intentionally or unintentionally. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time, and let's let it soak in for us today. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So, as we're thinking about our children and some of the things that can frustrate us or worry us, me and my husband, as we were raising our two kids, when their behavior might escalate or their anxiety, we would often reflect with each other, well, is there anything we're doing differently? And is our home the absolute best soil that it can be for these kiddos? And when I talk about a home environment, when I'm coaching parents or teachers, and again, this could refer to your classroom as well. These three things are the consistent factors that I hope can show up in every single home. And that is unconditional positive regard. And to put that very simply, it means there is nothing your child can do that would make you change the way you feel about them. Their behavior, getting in trouble at school, their grades, you love them the exact same amount every single day. And we actually say that to our kiddos. There is nothing you can do, positive or negative, that can change the way we feel about you. Against your classroom and your home should be a safe space. So, can you accept your child with everything that they bring to you and create an environment where they could open up to you about their friends, about their struggles, and about their strengths? And my favorite thing to make sure is in each and every family, in each and every home, is routines and rituals. This could be a bedtime talk routine. It could be a family meal together. It could be how you celebrate holidays. These are things that ground the child's brain and body into connection with you. Now, on this slide, I introduced this idea of a secure base. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, you can do some research if you'd like, comes out with 3 different attachment styles. These styles are secure, avoidant, and anxious. And again, you can do some research on your own if you'd like to, but this research shows the importance of what John Bowlby calls a secure base. And this is when infants are biologically compelled to stay close to a protective adult for survival. So when that child can trust their caregiver, they become a secure base. And from that secure base, they feel more secure in going outside of that space in order to learn new things, take risks, and try new activities. This will come into play now since we did stay home in that secure base for so long that a lot of kiddos and teenagers these days are much more anxious and fearful and hesitant to try new things. But we'll talk more about that later. So now that we've got our children in positive, healthy, and a safe space in that optimal soil, let's talk about after the plant is planted, what we do to help it grow and thrive. Okay, these are going to be really some tactical things that you can take with you today and implement or at least bring to the forefront of your mind as you're parenting. So, the three things we're going to cover here is water, weeding, and fertilizer. Now, water, we all know plants cannot survive without water. So, let's think about this as our children's basic needs. And that definition of basic need has really grown over the years as we learn more about the brain and more about how children are learning and growing. There are more basic needs than just food, water, and shelter. Okay. But during COVID, what we imagined was health and wellness shifted from what it was previously, which is living longer, growing stronger, to how do I feel comfort and how do I reduce my anxiety in such a scary environment right now. So, what did we do during this time? We allowed for more screen time, right? We shifted some boundaries. We expanded the amount that we are going to negotiate with our children because we wanted to reduce anxiety. And that's okay. And that's what we needed to do to adapt. But now I'm going to encourage you to go backwards and maybe reset some of those boundaries now that our life is back up to a busy pace again. Okay, are your children getting their daily movement in? Is there clear boundaries on screen time? You can do some research on the effects of screen time, particularly video games, on children's brains, not to scare you, but just to do your research so that you can plan your individual boundaries in your home. Can you shift back the boundaries on eating, sleeping, mindfulness, coping skills for children and us that have experienced trauma from the pandemic? And during my presentation, we talked about video games specifically because I know that during COVID, I did this too. My son was playing more video games, but with his friends. And so it was building community and they were doing it together. But there are some things about video games that hit areas in our brain that can cause addiction and can cause some unhealthy boundaries when we think we're interacting with other humans. What happens when your child loses a level or a game? They can start all over again, which isn't necessarily what can happen in a real life game. So, I am an elementary school counselor, and the sportsmanship post COVID has really taken a dive. And I really believe that because they weren't in real life playing with humans and feeling that discomfort that comes from losing because they can just start all over again has really impacted our children's ability to get along and solve conflicts and handle disappointment or losing when it happens. Weeding. We know that certain weeds or things in our life can be unhealthy for us. So, what I am referring to here is your input and guidance on what your child needs to take out of their life. So, input on their friends and activities. And a question I would love for you to ponder is, are you their guide? Or are you their bodyguard? I'm sure you have heard the term helicopter parenting, where a parent is following the child around to try to help them whenever they need it. And actually, a newer term might be bulldozer parent. So if you think about that metaphor, they're going in front of the child and bulldozing any potential obstacles so their child doesn't even have to experience them. And that is going to lead to a lack of skills for your child to solve their own problems. So if you step in with too strict of boundaries, or you can't play with this person or can't play with this person, and they never have to experience discomfort or conflict, how will they build the skills and make mistakes and fill in the blanks of what they're supposed to do next time? And again, this is going to be different for every family, every parent, every child. Just something to think about as you are deciding what your child will experience and who they will experience it with. The other thing I put into weeding is the importance of a child learning how to say no. Okay. A no is a really important word for children. And I know if you have 1 or 2-year-olds at home, you're like, my child knows how to say no. But we have to make sure as adults we are respecting their no. So if we say, hey, buddy, can we clean up our room today? And they say no. And we say, oh, it's not really a choice. What do they learn about their ability to say no? Oh, well, it doesn't matter if I say no, I'm going to have to do it anyways, right? And as we think about our children growing up and maybe starting to get into dating relationships, no is a really important word for boundaries and safety. So I would recommend and encourage you to reflect on how you're giving directions. And if your child is not allowed to say no, don't ask it as a question. So, hey, buddy, I'm going to ask you to clean your room today. You can do it now, or you can do it after you finish this show. Which one would you like? Giving them control and choice and their own voice being heard, but you are still getting what you want. And that no is not going to come in as a factor. The other phrase you'll hear me say a lot is please respect my no, or please respect their no. So as siblings are solving conflict or playing together or working together, if you hear one of your children say no or stop and the other sibling does not respect it, you may want to jump in and say, I just heard them say stop or no, and you kept going. Remember, when that someone asks us to stop, we need to respect their no. And as you use this term, you can throw it out there in short little bursts and they'll know what it means. All right. The fourth thing we're going to talk about with what plants needs is fertilizer. And my frame of reference for what fertilizer would be is communication and advice. So do you have time to talk, ask questions with your child in a routine or ritualistic way? A lot of people like to do it in the car, or a lot of people like to do it right before bed. And that's where we're together, but we're not necessarily just staring at each other with eye contact. And that can feel a little safer for your child, especially older children, to be able to tell you whatever they need. Some other things that might work for you is me and my older daughter had what we called open mic, and we would literally set a timer and she would get open mic time, and she could set the parameters. So she might say, and I don't want you to ask any questions. I would like open mic time and I don't want you to judge me. If your child is not necessarily a verbal processor, maybe they love to draw or they love to write, doing notes or a journal back and forth, or even with technology with older students, maybe emails back and forth, could be creating a safe space or a safer place than verbally processing for your child to be able to tell you things. My most favorite communication hack is what I call rating scales. Well, everyone calls them that, but here's how I use them. Sometimes when a child is really escalated or upset, we often ask what? What happened? What's wrong? What did so and so do? And their brain is not always ready to verbally process it and tell us what to do. So what we can start doing at a younger age is, wow, you look like you're having a big feeling. A little bit older, we can say, wow, from a 1 to 10, this looks like a size 10 problem. And then the follow-up could be, what do you need, or what can I do to bring that problem down, or bring you from a size 10 emotion to a size 8? And we just get this rating scale language going, and you can use it in a lot of different ways, especially for older children who start to feel embarrassed by some parent interactions. Let's say you're with your daughter and their friend and you're having a sleepover and you're noticing your daughter showing some signs of anxiety. Instead of saying, are you anxious right now? You could say, hey sis, 1 to 10, where are you at? Okay. And the friend might not necessarily know what that means, but it can be kind of private language between you two. Especially as they get older, sometimes they may be talking about more serious topics like self-harm or dating relationships or pretty heavy anxiety reactions to things or trauma triggers, using that 1 to 10 rating can be a way to talk about it without re-triggering the large emotion. And over time, as your child gets older, just like other interventions or strategies you might be trying, when you back off that intervention and advice, it really encourages them to grow and strengthen their own skills. So when a child brings you a problem and you have a lot of ideas from your life experience on how to solve it, maybe ask them what their ideas are first. Yes, often they will say, I don't know, but asking them first provides them a time to at least strengthen the connections in their brain that are trying to solve the problem. The hardest part of parenting, many would say, the aspect of letting go. So, in our gardening example, we do all the things. We weed, we make sure we have optimal soil, we're watering, but in the end, we're not fully in control of how that plant grows. We're not there every day pulling it out of the ground. We have to let go and let the natural course of life take place. So, coming back to the secure base, we want to create safety for them and an emotional and physical attachment to us so that they can leave and try new things. But if we never leave or push them to try new things, they might not ever do it because they do feel so secure with us. And here's where I was going to talk about the helicopter and bulldozer parenting, but I already referenced that earlier. So, the other thing that I love to share with parents, especially as the kiddos get older, is how are we creating multiple secure bases for them when they're not always going to be with us? Are there multiple friend groups they can feel identity and belonging with? Is there multiple activities that bring them joy and a sense of belonging? Also, this could end up being time spent with other meaningful and trusted adults like coaches or their friends' parents, maybe grandparents or aunts and uncles. This is a really important time for them to feel multiple attachments with multiple people. The other thing with letting go is decision making in your family of when to push them and when to pull them. So, what I hear from a lot of parents right now is after COVID, my child is afraid to try new things or doesn't want to go on this play date or doesn't want to go try this. And it's a really hard thing. Like, do I send them crying? Do I let them stay home? If they're having a panic attack because they don't want to take a test at school, should I let them stay home? And again, this is so dependent on their attachment style, their history, your personality, that it's really hard for me to say a blanket statement. But what I will say is talking about this with your child, especially if they're older, ahead of time when they are calm and not having an anxious moment, or not when we say their lid is flipped and their prefrontal cortex, that thinking part, is not fully online. Talking about this, like, man, you seemed really anxious last time you tried something new. And this is another thing that's new that you want to try. Let's say we get to the day where it's your first day and you don't want to go. Can we make a plan for what I'm going to do, what you want me to do ahead of time so we can plan ahead? And that proactive thinking will be helpful in the moment because you can say, oh, remember, we already had a plan for this. You'll notice that I'm not talking a whole lot about academics in this presentation, and not because they're not important, because they absolutely are. But during COVID, we adapted our academics so much to make them accessible. That is now our school and our education system's job to reset that pace and to meet children where they are. So the pressure of falling behind, I have heard from a lot of different parents, and they're doing different strategies at home to try to catch them up. But what's going to happen, if you think about it, is the families that are doing that are going to have their children go even further ahead. And then the teachers are still tasked with this job of catching everyone else up. So it kind of creates this inequity and this stair step of there will still be this gap. And so what I want to say is our education system and our teachers are doing an amazing job, a hard job of making sure they're meeting individual needs. And while it is great to do some extra academic practice, as long as that doesn't hurt your relationship at home. And I like to tell parents when they're working on school skills at home, it's not necessarily about the times tables or the spelling. It's also about how do we develop the child's growth mindset. and their response to failure. And those things will ultimately affect their academics way more than learning those spelling words or getting every multiplication problem right, because the act of learning is failing over and over and over again and still trying afterwards. All right, this quote gets me every time as a parent and as an educator who has to say goodbye to kids after they graduate 5th or 6th grade. And I just want us to think about that. No seed ever sees the flower. As parents, we are planting a seed in that optimal soil, in the dark, really, and we are doing all the things to help them grow. The seed never gets to see the flower. And the beautiful part of parenting and teaching is sometimes we do, especially if we're parenting, right? We get to, once we let go, watch that child show their skills and grow with their unique personality and reach their milestones whenever they're going to meet them. And we're not always in full control of that. So, as much as we want to be, there is this grief process of letting go and letting them grow. I get asked for book recommendations all the time. And on my next slide, I'm going to share with you a way to get even extra resources from me. But I just thought I would pause and share my top 2 parenting books I love to read. I've read a ton of them. These are the 2 that are really rising to the top for me. Good Inside by Dr. Becky Kennedy. She also has a really great Instagram page if you're interested in following her on social media. And then this other one is called Hunt, Gather, Parent. And this talks about not necessarily our American or westernized culture, but how other cultures that have been doing parenting, as we all have since the start of time, what can they teach us about this journey? And again, on our next slide, you can ask for an email from me by signing up on my Google form, and I'll send all of these to you with actual links. Here is where you can pause the video, use your camera, and hold the camera over this QR code. It'll take you to just, I believe, 4 or 5 quick questions. You can leave your email, and I will follow up with an email with extra resources, some of the ones I talked about, as well as this slide deck for you to reference or share with a friend, share with your partner, just some things to bring this information as we go about our busy lives back to the forefront of your brain. There is my email if you'd like to get a hold of me. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to honor the journey that you're on. It's beautiful and messy and hard. And I think any information we can take in that we can digest and get back out to grow healthy plants, healthy children, healthy us is just going to make our world a better place. And as cheesy as that sounds, that's what we're all here for, to grow our children and our families into beautiful, resilient beings that make an impact in the future. So thanks again for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I hope I get to meet some of you in person soon.